Hey everyone, welcome back. In last class we have learned how to handle the camera. Today we will dive into the most fundamental concept of photography. That is exposure triangle. If you have ever wondered how to take control of your camera and create perfectly exposed photos, so this video is for you. By the end of this video, you will understand how aperture, shutter speed and ISO work together to create a beautiful and well exposed photo. So let's get started. Hello, my name is Kim. I'm here to teach you a basic concept of photography. This video is strictly for beginners. In this video we will learn how lights work. There are three fundamental keys of light in camera: ISO, aperture and shutter speed. The exposure triangle is all about balancing the three key elements that control how light reaches your camera sensor. These three elements are aperture, shutter speed and ISO. We will learn these three key elements, how they work together. So each of these elements help your picture in the brightness, the sharpness and overall quality of your picture. So let's break down one by one. Okay, first let's learn about aperture. In last lesson also I have told you about the aperture. Aperture is the opening. Aperture is the opening of your lens. It measures in f-stop, like f1.8. f1.8 means a big opening, full. f2.8, so it goes on up to f15, f22. f22 means it's the smallest opening, very narrow. So it is counted by f-stop. Let's see how aperture work. Suppose say a lower f-stop like 1.8. It means a wider opening. Wider opening lets you more light. If your aperture is wide open, it will allow more lights to get in to the sensor, which make your picture bright, and it's create a shallow depth of field where your subject is in focus and your background is beautifully blurred. And this kind of picture is perfect and beautiful for portrait picture. A higher f-stop means f16, f22 means a narrow opening. So what happens if your aperture is narrow? It will allow less light to enter the sensor, but at the same time it will focus everything. Your subject, your background will be in a focus. It is ideal for taking group photo and landscape photography. For example, if you are shooting a portrait and want a dreamy and blurry background, so what you have to do, you have to use a wider aperture. That means lower f-stop like 1.8, f2.8. You have to use a wider opening to get a shallow depth of field. But when you are taking a landscape, we want to focus everything. In landscape, we have to raise the aperture high. That means the higher stop, f-stop, like f11, f14, f16. So you have to narrow your aperture so that everything is in a focused when you are shooting a landscape. So please keep in mind, wider opening, a shallow depth of field. Narrow opening means everything will be in a focus. Now you know how aperture works. Okay, now let's talk about the shutter speed. Shutter speed. So what's shutter speed? In last class we know that a shutter, when we press the shutter, it's take the photo. So today we will learn what is the work of shutter speed, how it's play a role in creating your image bright or dark. Let's have a look. Shutter speed means the amount of light when you keep your shutter open to let the light into your sensor. It is measured in fraction of second, like 1/500, 1/80, 1/20. It's measured in a fraction of seconds. Here how it's work. When your shutter speed is high, like 1 over 1000 or more. Less amount of light enter your sensor. At the same time, it is so fast that it frees the motion. So it is great for taking a wildlife and sports photography. A slow shutter speed like 1 over 5, 1 over 10 or slower than that, the shutter is very slow. The closing of the shutter will be slow, so it's allow more light. So a lower shutter speed means more light in your sensor and create a motion blur. You can use a lower shutter speed in a creative way, like taking a picture of waterfall or taking a night photography with the light trails. You can experiment the lower shutter in your own creative way. You cannot make the river or waterfall silky in a higher shutter speed. That means you have to lower your shutter speed. If you lower your shutter speed, you are letting more lights in your camera sensor. That means in a daytime, it will be very difficult for you to take a silky smooth waterfall unless you use ND filter. What is ND filter? I will let you know in next lesson. And finally, we have ISO. ISO measure your camera sensor's sensitivity to light. It is digitally processed inside your camera and it is represented by the number like 100, 200, 300. So let's see how ISO work. So a low ISO like 100, in some camera, in some flagship camera it goes up to 50, but most of the camera it start with 100, ISO 100. A low ISO like 100 make your sensor low sensitive to light, which gives you a cleaner, noise-free image. A high ISO like 1600, 3200 makes your sensor more sensitive to light, and in result, it can introduce noise and graininess in your picture. If you are using a smartphone or any point and shoot camera, that means if you raise your ISO to 1600 or more than 1000, that means you will have a grainy picture. Your image will be noisy, which will not be usable. For example, if you are shooting outdoor in a bright light, you have to shoot in the lowest ISO as possible, like 100 or 50, and which will give you a cleaner and noise-free image. But if you are shooting inside a dim light or at night, that means you have to raise your ISO to get a well-exposed picture. That means you have to shoot in a higher ISO like 1600 up to 3200. But keep in mind, this will create a noise. So you have to watch the noise. Now we know how aperture, shutter speed and ISO work. Now here where it's get interesting. The three elements of the exposure triangle which we have talked in the beginning, they are interconnected with each other. Changing one setting affect other. So you need to balance them to achieve a well-exposed image. This is where we will learn the exposure triangle. How to expose everything, your image well. Let's take an example. If you want to shoot a portrait outside with an open, wider aperture, just say 1.8, so that you will get a shallow depth of field. But at the same time, it's allow you more light to get inside your camera. Wider aperture, a lower shutter speed, and a higher ISO. That means every element is giving you more light in your sensor. So your image will be very blown out. Combination that we have to raise our shutter speed. Like if our shutter speed is in 1/100, that means we have to increase. And to make our picture clean, noise-free, we have to lower our ISO. That means we have to lower it to the 100. ISO 100, your aperture is 1.8, your ISO is 100. Now you adjust your shutter speed like 1/200, If it is bright, make it 1/300. If it is bright, make it 1/400. You raise up to the point where you get a perfect exposure. Now if you are taking the photo in a cloudy day, now the situation will be different. Now you need more light, because in sunny day there is enough light. Now it's cloudy, now you need more light in your camera. So what you have to do, you have to lower your aperture. Suppose if you are taking 2.8 in a sunny day, that means now you have to lower it to the 1.8, or how much lower it can go according to your lens. If you are having a kit lens, I think it will go up to f4. You cannot lower your aperture because your lens supports only f4. Now what you have to do, you have to lower your shutter speed, like 1/100 or 1/80. Still it's dark. Now you raise your ISO. ISO 100 is less, then make it 200, 300. You raise your ISO because everything is low. Now your aperture is in the lowest form, that is f4. Your shutter speed is also in a low, 1/60, because you cannot lower than that because it will have a motion blur. So you don't want a motion blur in your picture. So you stick up to 1/60. Your shutter speed is in the lowest point, your aperture is in the lowest point. Now your only option is ISO. So you raise your ISO higher and higher and higher and higher up to where your image is perfectly exposed. It's all about finding the right balance of these three elements. Suppose it's like a seesaw. If you put here heavy, it will go up. So you have to put something here to make it balance. So it's like a seesaw, okay? You try to balance using your aperture and shutter speed, because the more you increase your ISO, the more noise will come to your image. So I suggest, if you are having a DSLR or mirrorless, up to 1600 to 3200 is okay. You can use that image. But if you are using a smartphone or point and shoot camera, you stick to around 800. 800 may be okay, because your sensor is very small, so it's give you more noise. Practice how to balance these three elements. Go outside in the bright sunlight and go in a shady side, go indoor and try to balance these three together. If you master this exposure triangle, then you can take the image in any kind of scenario. Exposure triangle is not only used for exposing your image, because each element have its own side effect that can change your looks of your image. Aperture effect depth of field. Shutter speed affect your motion blur. So whether you want to freeze the motion or you want to smooth the motion, it's depend upon the shutter speed. ISO effect image noise. It's a graininess. So when balancing this triangle, for example, if you want a shallow depth of field, you might need to use a wider aperture and compensate with faster shutter speed and lower ISO. Let's look at the real world example. If you are shooting a waterfall and want that silky smooth effect, you will need to slow the shutter speed like 1/4 second. But the lower shutter speed let you lots of light, so your image will overexposed. To fix this, you need to narrow your aperture like f16 and lower your ISO like 100. Still, if the image is too bright, then you have to use the ND filter to reduce the light. So ND filter is the same like a sunglass to your lens. It will cut some light. Quick recap: aperture control your depth of field and light intake. Bigger aperture, more light. Smaller aperture, less light. Shutter speed control your motion blur and light. Higher shutter speed freeze the motion, take less light. Lower shutter speed have a motion blur effect and take more light. And the last one is ISO. It's control the sensitivity of light. Less ISO, clean image. More ISO, noisy or grainy image. By understanding how these three elements work together, you can take full control of your camera and create a stunning, well-exposed image in any kind of situation. Master this and you will soon able to take a great picture in any kind of situation. Thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next video. See you next time. Bye bye.